Chaos at the Inner Harbor. People running for their lives after two teens are shot just feet from police.
But we were standing out there and the shooting happened and then we had to run.
We bring you live team coverage of the terrifying events and question what can be done to regain control of downtown. Plus, the mayor proposes a curfew to address youth violence. Fox 45 News presses him on how it will be enforced.
And I see it as a win for students, for parents.
Fox 45 News Project Baltimore's reporting on failing public education gets results. The action that state leaders are taking to hold Maryland schools accountable. Midnight is approaching on the final day of the legislative session. We're live in Annapolis looking at how lawmakers are addressing public safety.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
This is, again, a message out to families who have young people. We need you too. I should not be talking to 10 and 11-year-olds on Pratt Street after a shooting happened in Baltimore City where young people have been shot and they don't know where their parent is. That happened last night. We can't be a city, we won't be a city where we allow that to happen.
Mayor Scott says a curfew is coming for Baltimore teenagers after recent violence at the Inner Harbor.
Now, a week after teens caused chaos downtown, another large group of kids gathered last night. And sadly, two teenagers, a 14-year-old and 16-year-old, were shot. Today, police are saying they're not sure who the shooter is.
And when the clock strikes midnight tonight, lawmakers in Annapolis will be ending this year's legislative session. Tonight, Fox 45 News demanding accountability on their work to address public safety.
There needs to be accountability for youth that are violating the laws.
What does juvenile accountability look like in your mind?
I think we have to be able to address the fact that we have far too many juveniles that are ending up in these situations where they are both posing a real challenge, not just to others, but also to themselves. And I think we're going to have to use every tool that we have in our capacity to be able to deal with that.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mary Bubala.
And I'm Kai Jackson. Fox 45 News has live team coverage tonight. Mackenzie Frost is in Annapolis as lawmakers end this year's legislative session.
Jeff Abel looking into the curfew for young people and whether it will address the violence that we're seeing.
First, Keith Daniels is looking into whether anything can be done to restore peace downtown. Keith?
Well, Kyle, we're live at the Inner Harbor downtown. It's part of the city police department's Central Police District, an area that's seen 18 homicides and 68 non-fatal shootings over the last year. And tonight, questions about safety in this area after the shooting of those two teens. At the Baltimore Inner Harbor, tranquility, an afternoon of peace Monday, one day after chaos. Sunday night, a truly volatile scene at the Inner Harbor with two teens shot on East Pratt Street. This viewer's video shows the moments that unfolded after the gunfire. A massive crowd of youth seen running in all directions.
But we were standing out there and the shooting happened and then we had to run.
We caught up with the wife and mother who was having dinner at the Cheesecake Factory at the Inner Harbor that night. She says before the gunfire, they saw the crowds gather. It put restaurant managers on alert.
The people, they did their best inside the store to let us know, inside the restaurant to let us know that, it was as far as locked down, nobody could get out.
But when her family did leave, walking to the car, they noticed more crowds, then gunfire.
My husband, at that time, he was trying to yank me, but still pushing my child in our stroller. So that was the startling part for him as my husband, trying to protect all of us. And then we're also looking back, making sure, because we was running.
This latest incident at the Inner Harbor triggering concerns about control. Former Baltimore Mayor Jack Young.
These kids, these young people have parents. Where are the parents?
And former Baltimore City Police Commissioner Daryl D'Souza.
There's violence, there's guns, then it's completely unacceptable.
Two city leaders weigh in how to control the crowds, police the Inner Harbor. Some have called for the National Guard.
And I wouldn't suggest at all or wouldn't recommend the National Guard coming in for this. I just think on the other hand that that there needs to be really a focus type of game plan.
Part of that plan, he says, includes focused attention on the crowds. Police do look for that one person who might have a gun.
You're looking for bulges in waistbands. You know, you're looking for little carry cases that, you know, people are always clutching and always tapping to make sure it's near the body.
But for Young, the focus should also be on the parents. Hold them accountable for the damage done and crimes committed by their children.
These kids need to know what I do is going to affect my parents. My parents could be locked up. My parents could be forced to pay money for the damage that I've done. And you'll get a handle on this crime in Baltimore.
Well, police say they arrested 2 teens shortly after that shooting. Again, they're trying to determine tonight if, in fact, either one of them was responsible for the shooting. We're live in downtown Baltimore tonight. Keith Daniels, Fox 45 News.
Keith, thank you. Well, this is not the first time chaos and violence has broken out in the Inner Harbor. As we mentioned last week, another large group of kids gathered there on Wednesday night. They blocked traffic. No one was hurt, but businesses did have to shut down. A year ago, 3 teens were shot at the Inner Harbor. A 17-year-old Baltimore boy died in that shooting. And across Pratt Street sits Inner Harbor Pavilions. And right now, most stores are closed, but a West Baltimore developer is working to restore it. Back in December, a filmmaker took us inside Harbor Place, a place which used to be really the city's crown jewel. Some fear the city's crippling crime rate may continue to overshadow or hinder investment in revitalization.
Public safety is the linchpin, the key to unlocking the potential of Baltimore City, but we're not there yet.
As Baltimore prepares to roll out a curfew this summer, could that keep kids and guns off the streets? Jeff Abel continues our live team coverage with more. Jeff.
Well, you know, curfews are becoming a very popular tool for cities who are struggling with juvenile crime, but researchers are not convinced they have any impact on reducing crime. Just hours after gunshots sent teens flying through the Inner Harbor, the mayor stood at City Hall promising a curfew for anyone under 17.
These simple, senseless acts of violence in our city have to stop.
It's becoming a common refrain for a number of cities who are struggling to combat juvenile crime. Prince George's County issued a curfew in September.
These kids don't just need a hug, they also need to be held accountable.
But there are questions about the impact of curfews. In a study released 6 years ago, researchers in Philadelphia concluded that juvenile curfews are not effective in reducing crime and victimization. In fact, when Philadelphia began enforcing a 10 p.m. curfew last year, many crimes actually increased when the curfew went into effect compared to a year earlier when there was no curfew. During Philadelphia's curfew last July, robberies with a gun soared 72%. Auto thefts went up 29%. In 2015, researchers concluded that D.C.'s juvenile curfew increased the number of gunfire incidents late at night by 69%.
The belief that it's just going to solve the problem by itself isn't upheld by research.
Dr. David Myers chairs the Criminal Justice Department at the University of New Haven. He says curfews are often not effective at stopping juveniles from committing crime.
Most juvenile crime occurs during the day, typically during the after-school hours, and by the time the curfew is in place or enforced, be it 10 p.m., 11 p.m. or later, there's just not that much juvenile crime going on.
While city leaders are still hammering out details of Baltimore's curfew, Myers says getting tough with curfews can have a lasting impact on teenagers accused of breaking them.
And that adds, concerns with providing things like an arrest record or contact with the police, perhaps when no crime is being committed.
Baltimore's curfew will not take effect until Memorial Day. Violators could face up to $500 fines. We are live tonight. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
Jeff, thank you. This brings us to our question of the day. Do you think Baltimore leaders need to take drastic measures to get crime under control? We just opened the poll. You can weigh in right now at foxbaltimore.com/vote. We'll check in on this poll again at 10:30.
We have breaking news to report tonight. A shooting investigation is taking place near the Olive Garden at White Marsh Mall. Baltimore County Councilmember David Marks took to Facebook shortly before 9 o'clock to urge people to stay away from the area. In the past 10 minutes, police confirmed to Fox 45 News that a person was shot and taken to the hospital. Their condition is not known at this time, and there is no information about a suspected gunman. Fox 45 News will keep you updated on this story.
Maryland's legislative session is winding down with about 2 hours left this year. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost joins us live from the State House. And Mackenzie, lots of talk this session on curbing violent crime. What ultimately made it through?
Well, Mary, right now we know that a bill curbing where legal gun owners can bring their firearms in public is on its way into Governor Westmore's desk. But when it comes to legislation addressing repeat violent offenders and addressing the rise in juvenile crime, those bills seem to be stalled. The soundtrack of lawmakers marching to midnight as this year's General Assembly session winds down. Throughout the 90-day affair, guns and gun violence rising to the top of many agendas. Senate Bill 1, curbing where concealed carry gun owners can bring their weapons even if they have a permit. Critics argue the plan, primed for legal challenges and doesn't address violent crime.
Why don't you focus on the repeat violent offenders? And when you cast a vote like this, we should take their words into account.
But it's on its way to Governor Westmore's desk. Bills targeting repeat violent offenders or legislation looking at implementing tougher penalties for juvenile offenders barely getting committee hearings.
Those bills are still in the drawers of our chairs.
And digging deeper into juvenile offenders, Governor Moore acknowledging there is a growing problem.
I think it is incredibly important that we collectively deal with this issue. There needs to be accountability for youth.
But how to tackle that problem is where the fractures form. What does juvenile accountability look like in your mind?
I think we have to be able to address the fact that we have far too many juveniles that are ending up in these situations where they are both posing a real challenge, not just to others, but also to themselves.
We got to put things in place where not just probation, we got to make sure they do time.
Republicans left looking at stacks of stalled legislation, while Democrats like Senator Jill Carter, who's the architect behind the juvenile justice plan, doubles down on her bill shielding kids who commit crimes from responsibility.
So it's not nothing, but what it is that no, the child, the 12-year-old that brought the gun to school is not going to be put in handcuffs or a cage or a cell.
As the surge in youth violence continues, Baltimore City Mayor Brandon Scott implementing a curfew. We sent him a few questions asking what laws need to change to ensure accountability and consequences for young people. Governor Moore tapped Vincent Schiraldi to lead the Department of Juvenile Services, a man who has written about keeping anyone charged with a crime 25 years old and younger out of the adult system. Given his views and the problems in the city, we also asked the mayor, is Schiraldi good for the city? The mayor and his team completely ignoring our questions.
Juveniles who commit even heinous crimes are essentially getting a slap on the wrist.
Zach Smith, a criminal justice policy expert at the Heritage Foundation, says lawmakers missed their chance to get a handle on this youth violence crisis.
Until lawmakers get serious about holding all offenders, including juvenile offenders, accountable for their crimes, I think you'll continue to see this unfortunate trend of more and more juveniles committing violent crime.
And after almost all of session, the one bill pushed by Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates faced hurdles, ultimately getting rolled into another bill in passing.
We're one step closer to being able to ensure swift, certain, and serious consequences.
Marking one plan, he says, that could help save lives in Baltimore and across Maryland. You can hear the bells ringing right now. Lawmakers are making their way back into session for one final time before casting those final votes before midnight. We saw the balloons on their way upstairs to mark the ceremonial end when the clock strikes midnight. But I did speak with Senator Cory McCray, a Democrat from Baltimore City, just moments ago. He voted against Senate Bill 1, going against the other Democrats in the chamber. He tells me that he does have some constitutionality concerns about the bill and says lawmakers really should have spent their time tackling illegal guns in the city and in other communities, not going after legal gun owners. We're live in the State House. Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
It's interesting, Mackenzie. Long day for everyone down there. Thank you for your coverage. Well, this week, City State's Attorney Ivan Bates will mark his first 100 days in office. And Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost will be hosting that town hall with Bates to talk about the milestone on Thursday night, April 13th at 7. We invite you to join us at New Metropolitan Baptist Church at 1501 McCullough Street or watch the town hall live on foxbaltimore.com. Well, coming up at 10:30, national correspondent Kayla Gaskins breaks down the crime crisis facing cities across the nation as Baltimore struggles to get the violence under control.
Still ahead on Fox 45 News at 10 o'clock tonight. In the wake of Project Baltimore's reporting on struggling schools, the legislative action now being taken to help children. We'll have a look at the education bills as the 2023 legislative session winds down. We'll have the latest on that deadly shooting from Louisville, Kentucky, what we're learning about the gunman, and an update on survivors. Also ahead at 10:30 tonight, chaos at the Inner Harbor in Baltimore, somewhat of a microcosm of what's playing out in cities across America, according to some observers, not just when it comes to violence, but how businesses are packing up and leaving.
Maryland lawmakers have taken action after a series of Project Baltimore reports exposed alarmingly low math scores in many Baltimore City and Baltimore County schools.
Chris Papps reports on what state lawmakers are doing to improve math proficiencies.
Delegates Kathy Schlega.
We need to demand better.
And Ryan Naraki.
We have a big problem.
Both represent Baltimore County.
With 47 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 200, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed.
And they say in the final days of this year's Maryland legislative session, Annapolis took significant action to hold public schools accountable.
I do see it as a win, and I see it as a win for students, for parents.
We need to have some accountability that will make sure that our schools across the state are succeeding and not failing children.
Baltimore City is facing a devastating reality.
Schlega and Naraki were watching in February when Project Baltimore analyzed state test scores and found 23 Baltimore City schools had 0 students among those who took the state tests last year score proficient in math. 10 high schools, 8 elementary schools, 3 middle high schools, and 2 elementary middle schools.
So seeing 23 failing schools in Baltimore City with 0 kids proficient in math was horrifying.
We also reported on another 7 schools in Baltimore County that had 0 students test proficient in math last year, which included big high schools like Chesapeake and Pikesville.
We are beyond the point of kind of just talking about doing things. We actually need to do things now at this point.
After seeing those Fox 45 reports on math proficiencies, Naraki and Schlega wrote these letters to Baltimore County Public Schools and state education leaders asking for specific plans to improve math scores and also asking how persistently underperforming schools will be held accountable. The delegates say the answers were not good enough.
We can't just keep hearing, oh, we're going to get better. Oh, we're doing these lofty things. But in the end, if students don't achieve better, what will happen to the school?
So Naraki and Schlega, both Republicans, reached out to Delegate Ben Barnes, a Democrat from Prince George's County.
This legislature is now in session.
Who chairs the Appropriations Committee. Together, the three lawmakers added language into the state's budget, demanding that the Maryland State Department of Education address math scores, not just in Baltimore City and Baltimore County, but throughout all of Maryland. Math proficiencies statewide for 3rd through 8th graders are down 11% from 2019 to 2022.
House Bill 200, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed.
This is the language in the budget that passed last week. It mandates that MSDE submit a report by July 1st, outlining the state's plan to address math proficiency. The language says, it is the intent of the General Assembly that the plan be implemented in the 2023-2024 school year and include specific accountability measures that would be put into effect should individual local education agencies or individual schools fail to improve math proficiency scores within 2 academic years. If MSDE fails to comply with this measure, it stands to lose $50,000 in funding.
$50,000 in a $63 billion budget. It's not that much.
Sure, it's not a big dollar figure. However, I think what it is about is the fact that it's 188 legislators, the House and the Senate, saying we want to see a plan on this.
It just brings the weight of we want an answer. You know, we're not just asking nicely. We're telling you that we need to see this information.
Delegate Barnes told Project Baltimore in a statement, we all share the goal of math proficiency and want the department to focus on this. Declines in test scores and overall student achievement is a national trend that Maryland is addressing head on.
So it's a win for anyone that wants to make sure that kids aren't doomed to failing schools, frankly. That carries a lot of weight when it's the entire legislature saying this is unacceptable.
I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore.
Let's be clear about what this was. This was an evil act of targeted violence.
The death toll rises in today's mass shooting inside a Kentucky bank, but we know about the 25-year-old shooter.
And come this Friday, a widely used abortion pill could stop from being sold. The legal battle that's underway.
It was a gorgeous day, and really we've had a great start to the week with plenty of sunshine, and the weather just keeps getting better over the next few days. Tomorrow, we're talking the mid-70s with plenty of sunshine. Then on Wednesday, the low 80s, the mid-80s by Thursday. I'll let you know how long this warming trend lasts and when we have our next weather maker coming up in my full forecast.
Another mass shooting in our nation, this time inside a Kentucky Louisville bank.
Well, the shooter has been identified as 25-year-old Connor Sturgeon. Police say he worked at the downtown Louisville branch of the Old National Bank. Authorities say he entered the bank, opening fire, killing 4 people. Officers responded, exchanged gunfire with the suspect who was killed.
We lost 4 children of God today, one of whom was one of my closest friends.
Well, 9 other people were hurt, including an officer who was shot in the head. Agents from the FBI and ATF are assisting local officials in the investigation, trying to determine a motive.
A black lawmaker expelled last week from the Tennessee House is returning. Democrat Justin Jones is one of 2 lawmakers voted out for joining gun control protesters inside the chambers. But tonight, the Nashville Metropolitan Council voted unanimously to return him to his seat.
We'll continue to fight for our constituents. Their attack on democracy hurts all of us.
Tennessee Republicans say the expulsions were not a political attack. The other lawmaker, Justin Pearson, could be reappointed Wednesday during a meeting of the Shelby County Commission. Both will have to win their seats back in upcoming special elections.
New tonight, a Virginia mother is charged after her 6-year-old is accused of shooting a teacher. The 25-year-old mother is facing a misdemeanor charge of endangering a child by reckless storage of a firearm. The boy shot his 6th grade teacher, Newport News, in January inside her classroom, according to police. And police say the mother legally purchased that weapon. The mother's attorney says she had secured it on a top shelf in her closet with a trigger lock.
Well, sales of a widely used abortion pill could stop by this Friday. Last week, a federal judge in Texas ruled to suspend the FDA's approval of mifepristone. It's been available for more than 20 years and accounts for about half of all abortions. The Justice Department has called the recent move extraordinary and unprecedented. While an appeal plays out, states are scrambling. The governor of Massachusetts today signed a law to keep the pill legal and announced they are stockpiling doses of the drug.
A judge has made a politically motivated decision to override doctors, patients, and medical experts and block access to critical medications. Today, we collectively are saying loud and clear, not on our watch.
The Texas ruling Friday came as a separate federal judge directed U.S. authorities to not make any changes that would restrict access to the pill in at least 17 states. The conflicting decisions will likely be fast-tracked to the U.S. Supreme Court. Tonight, Maryland Attorney General Anthony Brown joined a group of attorneys general fighting the Texas ruling.
Brutal, high-profile murders drawing attention to crime in big cities. I'm Kayla Gaskins in Washington.
An hour and a half left in this year's legislative session. We're live in Annapolis with updates on legislation on the rollout of recreational marijuana.
And the apology from the Dalai Lama after video shows him asking a young child to do something inappropriate.
have to have accountability.
A longtime resident of Baltimore speaks to youth violence in the city. Last night, two teenagers, a 14-year-old and 16-year-old, was shot in the Inner Harbor during a large gathering of young people.
It happened as police arrested another teen during a large fight. Now, despite police being less than 50 feet away, somebody then opened fire. Tonight, police are still not sure who's the suspect.
Last night's gathering came after a similar one last week. News of it spread on social media, and law enforcement expert Tyrone Powers says the Baltimore Police Department has to keep social media posts on its radar, especially as the city struggles to fill in officer positions.
So you have to have an intelligence apparatus so that you can act rather just than react, and you have to have force multipliers so that you can bring all the agencies together, because you do have a deficiency in police officers in this city.
Well, the Baltimore Police Department is down 489 officers by the police department's own accounting. Well, Baltimore isn't the only U.S. city facing concerns over violent crime and its impact on residents and businesses. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins is taking a look at the issues here and across the nation.
Two teens shot over the weekend in Baltimore's Inner Harbor. A large crowd of 200 young people gathering at the tourist location. Chaos erupting as shots rang out.
I'm still trying to process what I saw. That was just madness, that's all.
Across the country, San Francisco still reeling from the death of Cash App creator Bob Lee. The 43-year-old tech entrepreneur was stabbed to death earlier this month.
Residents are feeling like the city is not working for them, and they just want clean streets, safe streets, and good schools.
A friend of Lee's saying rising crime was one reason he recently moved his family from San Francisco to Miami. Referencing Lee's death, actress Sarah Foster taking to social media saying, quote, "I am a registered Democrat and I feel confident saying liberal politicians are ruining cities," end quote. In Washington, D.C., 31-year-old visitor Christy Batista died after being stabbed 30 times. Her attacker should have been behind bars for armed robbery, a Biden-appointed judge releasing him early in January. Rising crime comes with economic consequences.
People fear going into certain areas, so who would ordinarily be the customers for businesses shy away from certain areas for fear of crime.
Downtown sectors of cities seeing an exodus of business as crime rates spike. Nike closing their downtown Seattle location earlier this year, following the likes of Starbucks, Seattle Credit Union, and other smaller businesses. Chicago seeing a similar phenomenon. A spokesperson for Citadel says they're having a tough time recruiting top talent to Chicago because, quote, talent wants to live in cities where they feel safe.
Recent polling shows the economy remains the top issue for voters, while close to 70% of Americans see crime as a threat to most communities. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
More American children and teenagers were killed by guns in 2021 than any year since 1999, when the CDC began keeping reports. A new Pew Research Center report says gun deaths among American children rose 50% in the last 2 years. In 2019, pre-pandemic, 1,700 gun deaths were recorded among U.S. children and teens under 18. By 2021, that number rose to more than 2,500. The majority, 60%, died by homicide, while 32% died by suicide. 5% were accidental. Now, in Baltimore, homicides is the leading cause of death for children.
Mayor Brendan Scott says he wants to reinstate a curfew for young people this summer. The citywide curfew will begin Memorial Day weekend. It would ban those under 14 from being outside after 9 and those under 17 from being outside after 10 during the week and 11 on the weekends. Rebecca Pryor pressed the mayor on how this curfew would be enforced.
Who will be doing the enforcement? Is it going to be police officers? And then again, are they going to be taking them to the rec centers at all hours, or will they be taking them home?
So I won't get into the details of when we would take a young person home. BPD will be doing the enforcement. Law enforcement is the only ones that actually can do the enforcement portion.
The mayor says the city is working to set up summer camps and other programs this summer. Details have not been released. Well, last year on Memorial Day, 3 teens were shot at the Inner Harbor right in the presence of Baltimore police. 17-year-old Neil Mack was killed and 2 girls injured. Police later arrested and charged a 15-year-old Howard County boy for his death. Let's check in on our question of the day. Do you think Baltimore leaders need to take drastic measures to get the crime crisis under control? So far, 100% say yes. You can also weigh in right now at foxbaltimore.com/vote.
Lawmakers are still working with less than 2 hours left in this year's session.
And Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost joins us live from the State House again. Mackenzie, get us up to speed on the state's cannabis plan.
Yeah, Mary Kay, this was another big piece of legislation. Lawmakers tasked with setting up the framework after voters approved the recreational marijuana plan last year. And after some back and forth and some significant debate throughout the last 90 days or so, here's what we know right now as this plan moves to Governor Wes Moore's desk. On July 1st, 1.5 ounces of weed will be legal. It'll be taxed at 9%, and the medical cannabis businesses will get the first chance to get recreational businesses licenses first on July 1. January 1st of 2024, social equity applicants will begin, and then another round of licenses will be available after May 1st of next year. And here's what we know about the standard licenses. 300 will be available for dispensaries, 100 for processors, 75 for growers, and for micro licenses, 10 will be available for dispensaries, 100 for processors, and 100 for growers. Now, when it comes to online and delivery services, Marylanders looking to get that available for their legal recreational marijuana starting July 1st. We'll have to wait until at least mid-2025 for the delivery services and online sales to begin. Kai?
And Mackenzie, TikTok, right? What about the child sex abuse bill extending the statute of limitations? We know that's up as well, right?
Yeah, that one is also going to Governor Wes Moore's desk for his approval. He has signaled that he does plan to sign it, and we know that it is one of the first bills that he will sign tomorrow during a bill signing scheduled for noon. And we know that this piece of legislation has really been emotional for some lawmakers here. The House version was sponsored by Delegate C.T. Wilson, who has been pretty open about his own experience and his own personal story of sex abuse as a child. We know this became even more public during the publication of the Catholic Church abuse report that was published by the Attorney General's office. And a lot of survivors are expected to be here in the State House for that bill signing. Again, that's scheduled to begin at noon tomorrow. Lawmakers still working. We're expected to see the confetti and the balloon drop just as the clock strikes midnight, so we're not done just yet. Live in the State House, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Mackenzie, thank you. Stay with Fox 45 News for continuing coverage.